In this presentation, I'm going to demonstrate using a single Twig template to generate multiple layouts and also how to turn that template into a reusable component. First, I'm going to look at the design to see what I need to do. This comp contains 4 different layouts for what I'm going to call a call to action component. The first one is a horizontal layout where the image and text are in line with each other. The second one is a horizontal layout where the image is being used as a background design element. The third one is essentially the same as the second one, except the background design element extends beyond the max width of the page and would always be edge to edge in the browser. And finally, the fourth one is a vertical layout where the image is above the text. The main thing that I'm looking for here are the similarities between the different layouts. In this case, the similarities are that they will all have an image and they will all have text and a button within a single container. I have created a custom block type called call to action and added the fields to reflect the content that I'm going to need to build a call to action on my site. I have a title field for the main title, a subtitle for any secondary information, a body field for copy, an image field, and a link field for the button. I also have a layout field where I've added a value for each one of the different layouts that I'm going to need. I have gone ahead and created a call to action block for each one of my 4 layout options using the layout field. Currently, these will all look exactly the same because they are all inheriting the same styling and they are all using the same template file. I'm going to change that by creating a template override. Since I'm going to be creating template overrides, the first thing I'm going to do is go to the settings.local.php file for my site and uncomment the lines that will allow me to disable the render cache. This will make it so that I don't need to clear the cache every time I make an update to a template file in the theme. The second thing I'm going to do is enable Twig debugging in my development.services.yaml file. Doing this will output some information in my inspector so that I can see which template each piece of the site is using and what names I will be able to use to override a template. I will need to clear the cache and reload the page for these changes to take effect. Now I'm able to see where the element I'm inspecting in the browser is coming from. In this case, it's coming from block.html.twig with based on the value of the layout field. I'm going to need to create a template override that will only affect my call to action block type. I can do that by creating a copy of the block.html.twig template file and renaming it to one of the file name suggestions provided by Twig debug. I've found the template here in my theme template directory, and in this case I will save it as block-call-to-action.html.twig. Since I've created a new file, I'll need to clear the cache for Drupal to recognize it. If I refresh the page, the block will now be using the template file that I've just created, and I'm now ready to begin customizing the markup. I'm going to speed parts of this up and stop periodically to explain what I'm doing. At this point, I've effectively separated the image and content into 2 containers, and I'm ready to begin styling. I'm going to create a new directory called components, and within that, a new Sass file called calltoaction.scss. Any new SCSS file I add to the theme will need to begin with an underscore. If it doesn't begin with an underscore, it will be compiled into a separate .css file with the same name and not be included in the theme style sheet. In my template, I've created classes following a BEM naming structure. This means that I can use the ampersand symbol to append my element name to my containing block name, which will result in a new CSS rule for each block element combination, and also I'll end up with a more organized and maintainable style sheet. You can find more information about BEM at getbem.com. Just in case anyone is wondering why my hex color values are highlighted as different colors, I'm using a Sublime Text plugin called Color Highlight, which makes it a lot easier to differentiate colors in the style sheet. At this point, I've essentially styled the basics of the component, and it's now looking pretty identical to the vertical layout option, with the exception of the text from the layout field value still being visible on the block. I'm going to use the value of this field as a modifier class name to give conditional styling for each layout depending on which value has been selected. I can do this in the Twig template by setting a new variable called CTA_layout to be the raw value of the field and using the clean class filter to turn any spaces or underscores to dashes and any uppercase letters to lowercase. I'm also going to create a new Drupal attribute object using the create attribute function and set my class names as an array called CTA_classes. I can then use Drupal's add class method to add my classes to the containing div. Now I will have a modifier class depending on which layout has been selected for each block, and I can style them accordingly. I've gone ahead and styled the horizontal and vertical layouts conditionally based on the layout modifier classes, and I now need to do something similar for the layouts with background images. I'm going to do this by writing a condition that will merge a call to action has BG modifier class on the container if the layout is set to background stretch or background contain. This way I'll be able to share styling between those two layouts without having to stack selectors or repeat code. With this conditional modifier class now working, I now need to set a new variable to get the URL of the image field to use as an inline background image style, which I will call CTA_IMG_URL. I got the value for this variable by drilling down through the data using the devel module to target the URI value, which will contain the path to the image. And of course this could all be done with a preprocess function, but I'm just doing it here to show that it is a possibility. I'm also using a filter here from the Twig Tweak Drupal module, which provides some useful extra functions and filters. In this case, it will allow me to set an image style in the template, which also works for responsive image styles. For this demonstration, I'm just setting it to an image style that I already know exists. In the real world, I would want to make a style that will work for this specific context. With this set, I can now write a condition to use this variable as an inline background image style when the layout is set to background contain or background stretch. I can see that this is working as expected in the inspector, but it still needs some conditional styling in order for the background image to appear, which I will add now. Now they are both looking identical because they are both inheriting styling based on the hasBackground modifier class. I now need to add some specific styling for the background stretch layout, which needs to extend beyond the max width of the site. This is a scenario that comes up often on real sites, and I have a trick to get around it without having to alter any page markup or remove any max widths. The trick is to set the element to be 100% of the viewport width using the VW unit, and assuming that its parent is 100% of the max width, set the left value to 50%, which will position its left edge exactly in the center of the page, and then pull it back to the left edge of the page by setting the left margin to -50 VW. Now I have all four of the layouts styled using one template and only 86 lines of Sass, and I will show you how this can be made into a reusable component. The first thing that I'm going to do is create a Twig file to contain the call to action markup. For organization, I'm going to put this file into the partials directory because I can see that there's another Twig file in there without the .html extension, which means that it's not a Drupal template. It's a Twig file that can be included in a Drupal template. Now I'm going to copy over my markup from my block template and alter it a little bit. I'm going to move the filter for setting an image style onto the CTA image URL variable so that no matter what this is set to, it will apply this filter. I'm going to change all of the content.fieldName variables into something more generic, and I'm going to prefix them all with CTA underscore whatever the name is. I'm commenting out the variables at the top that I was setting as field data because I'm going to set those in the template that I'm including this component in. Back in the block template file, I can now remove all the call to action markup and replace it by including the call to action Twig component file that I just created on the right. And now all that I need to do is map the variables from the call to action Twig component file to the fields that are in the call to action block type. And this isn't really going to look any different right now because they are still set the same as before. So I'll switch the subtitle and label fields to make sure that it's working. And I can see that the subtitle field and title have swapped places, which means that it's working. And now that it is working, I can include and reuse it wherever I want just by mapping the variables. So to test that, I'm going to be adding this to a paragraph type. So I'm just going to fill out these fields and save it. And if I go to the page, I can see my unstyled paragraph. I'm going to inspect it and find out where the template is coming from and what I can call it to override it. And it looks like it's coming from the paragraph module and not my theme, so I'm going to go grab it and copy it into my theme. And now I'm going to rename it so that I can override it. Now I can include my call to action Twig component and map the variables. And I'm just checking to see what the field machine names are for this. And now mapping the component variables. And since I don't have a layout field on this paragraph, I'm just going to set the layout variable to whatever layout I want to use for these. Oh, and it looks like we have a label showing, so I'm just going to go and hide that. And it also looks like the subtitle and title are still swapped because I just copied this from my other example, so I'm going to switch that back too. And another problem, my title isn't showing, but that's because I left a condition in the component for a label being present, and I just need to change that to CTA title instead. And now I can just cycle through all my layouts and make sure they work.